A double negative like I don't see nothing is a positive, right? That's why they tell you not to use it in English class. Then why is it standard in some languages? In Spanish, for example, the sentence no veo nada directly translates to not I see nothing, which is a double negative, but it means I don't see anything. It seems to break propositional logic, which says that if it's false that something's false, it means it's true. Here's why it doesn't, though. In English, when I say I see nothing or I don't see a thing, the negativity is all contained in one word, either nothing or don't. But why should it have to work like that? Even in propositional logic, we often use parentheses to bookend negative statements on both ends. So it's completely logical for a language to work like this. I, start negative, see something, end negative. And that's pretty much how Spanish grammar works. In the sentence no veo nada, you can think of no as opening the parentheses and nada as closing it. No logical problems here. So there's nothing wrong or inherently illogical about double negatives. They just happen to not be standard in English. But of course, a lot of non-standard English dialects do use double negatives. And there's nothing inherently illogical about those either. In fact, Old English, the origin of all varieties of English, use double negatives too. Where does the word ain't come from? Originally, ain't was just a contraction just like aren't or isn't, but for am, so it's amn't basically, and it was pronounced ant. So in some dialects of English, instead of saying I'm not going, you'd say I ain't going. However, in dialects of English where the R's get dropped, it kind of sounds similar to aren't, so it's aunt and ant. And both of those sound pretty similar to isn't if you drop the S, which is actually pretty common, so it'd be more like in. Basically, in a lot of dialects, including the Cockney dialect, all these kind of merged into just this one word, ain't. While ain't is usually considered not standard, there's actually an effect that it's had that is standard. For instance, if you're asking if somebody's hungry and you're expecting them to be hungry, you might say, aren't you hungry? But let's say you're asking yourself that. You'd be like, aren't I hungry? The reason R is used here is because it got really common in the past to mix up aren't and ant. In standard American English, R and I are only really seen together in this question form, but in some dialects in the UK, people will still say like, I aren't going. If that ain't interesting, I don't know what is. Why do some people, especially African Americans, say ax instead of ask? Well, it's often maligned as a simple mispronunciation of ask. It actually has a deeper history than you'd think. The word ask comes from Old English askion, so that pronunciation is like 1500 years old. But you know what else is? Axion. The English word for ask has had a sk and a ks pronunciation since the time of Chaucer. In fact, Chaucer himself even used the word axe like this. The first settlers of the United States spoke many dialects of English, some that had the sk pronunciation and some that had the ks. In the South, many African Americans learned the ks pronunciation. Over time, the sk pronunciation became the standard in most other places. Switching letters around like this isn't unique to English though. For instance, in vulgar Latin, one of the words for word was parabola, so the R comes before the L in the word. However, the modern standard Spanish pronunciation is palabra. There's nothing wrong with standard dialects, but it doesn't mean that non-standard dialects are mispronunciations of the standard. Dialectal variation's cool, and it's been around for a pretty long time. Abso-frickin-lutely. What's it called when we break a word in half like this and add something in the middle to make a new word? This is called an infix, and in English it's pretty rare, but in other languages it's just how they form words. For instance, in the language Tagalog, the word sulat means right, but the word sumulat means to write. In Semitic languages like Arabic, you just switch in different vowels to make different words. So for instance, with the root KTB, you put in katib to mean writer or kitab to mean book. Other than abso-frickin-lutely, we do this in other places in English too. For instance, a lot of people would say mother-in-law is one word, but the plural is mothers-in-law, and we put the S in the middle. And we kind of do the Arabic vowel thing too, with like compress versus compress, or project versus project, but that's more of a stress thing. Is it the former or the latter? I think you mean ladder. Ladder is something you climb up. Yeah, I guess. I mean, a lot of people pronounce this the same. Okay, that doesn't mean it's right. Just pronounce T's as T's and D's as D's. It's not that hard. I mean, the context usually makes it pretty clear which one I'm using, and also just sounds merge sometimes in languages. Okay, well, not in proper English. Like, I still distinguish marry and marry and caught and caught. How about why and why? Well, nobody distinguishes that one anymore. Okay, so you say it's correct to say it how it's spelled, and then you say it's correct to say it how everybody else says it. Did Americans used to speak with a British accent? Or is it the other way around? Let's focus on the R sound, like in the word arm. Before the founding of the United States, basically everybody in Britain and in America would pronounce that word arm and not However, around the time of American independence, it became very popular to start dropping those R's in British cities. Around this time, a lot of British immigrants would come to the northeastern United States. This is why in Boston, you can still hear people pronouncing the word arm as am. Eventually, R dropping got really common in Britain, especially in the standard received pronunciation. However, British English is conservative in ways that American English isn't. For example, in the United States, we'd pronounce both of these words as ladder, but in Britain they would pronounce one as lada and the other as lata or something like that. And so they preserve this distinction that is lost in the United States. So both accents are conservative and innovative in different ways.